This is not going public, is it?
Welcome to La Casita Martinez, where we indulge in the art of deep conversation and vulnerability in pursuit of self-love, self-expression, and self-value. I am your host, Samantha Martinez. On this week's episode, we sit down with my friend, Heena Paracha, a Pakistani-American woman whose outlook on life and self-identity was shaped by her cultural duality and by always centering humanity. And so a little bit about Heena before I let you introduce yourself. I moved here from a big city, and moving here, I didn't think I was going to have friends like you. And I'm so happy that I met you and that we can connect on different levels, but just to explore, you know, we're similar in certain areas, but we're so different in others. And I love that I can expose myself to people like you who have different backgrounds and experiences, and we can learn from each other. So to me, Heena, you are powerful, you're independent, you're so sweet, but you're so strong at the same time. And who is Heena to you?
Oh my God, you're who is Heena? That's deep. I know you prepared me for this, but still not prepared for this. I think for me, who am I? I've been a constant change. That's the only thing that I can promise that I have done is changed and adapted and moved. And so I was different things at different stages of my life. As a young kid, I was very curious. I was very creative. I did, just had the same kind of passions, but I did them fearlessly. And a lot of that fearlessness came from a lot of support from my family.
Yeah.
And I was allowed to be a kid. Slowly, things changed. The way that our household wasn't as secure anymore. I started to notice, our parents weren't really getting along as much. And as a child, I think those things you internalize and you don't really know how it's affecting you. But, slowly, the fear started to kind of seep in. There was a lot of experiences that I had as a girl, realizing your identity, a lot of times, right, you don't find out your identity, you're just given your identity. And being a woman is that. You never at one point are just okay, today I have found out that I am a woman. You're just a woman. They're viewed as that. And it's the same thing, race, when you come to the U.S. But as I started to find out that I was a woman and I'm put into a specific box where I'm supposed to do this or that or not do this and that, I think there's a lot of gratefulness in the same time, because I can't say that I did this all on my own, right? But I gained a lot of insight from how my dad interacted with the world, and how he would be happy, but there'd be times where he would talk about how frustrated he was about the injustices. And I don't think he fully grasped or had the terms for it to express where that was coming from, or maybe he didn't necessarily have a way to express it properly in a way that could be understandable to anyone. But he was, I think he, and the thing that's coming up for me right now, which I'm trying to explain without actually showing the image, but I might as well just share the image. It's my dad we had servants in Pakistan. And that's, I've kind of battled with trying to understand, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is that something that needs to be fixed or not? And it's, you have to be in the culture to like understand where that stands. And for to a degree, it provides jobs. And then to other degree, it's like creates a social class system. But regardless, I think we had a servant quarter as well where, you know, they can stay and like have a room. And Dad would go in his emotional like moments, he would go and sit with them in the quarters, and he would just be like, why should they have to sit there? And there was just like brief moments. I'm not saying like he was like super humble and was just like, no, let me sleep here and you go sleep in my bed or anything like that. But those moments I picked up, and I guess like for me, that mattered enough where I was just like, okay, that means something. And I like in school around that time, like when I was just super young, like I want to say like 6 or 7, there was a girl in my class, and at the time I didn't know this, but I was a straight A student, like pretty much like a teacher's pet. Like teachers loved me. And then there was this girl who would sit in the back of the class and would get in trouble all the time. And Pakistani teachers at the time were like pretty strict. Like they would throw your notebooks across the room, like crazy stuff like that. So she would sit in the back, and she would always get in trouble, and like really bad repercussions. Like I said, throwing notebooks at her, and like just there was corporal punishment too. Like they would slap you, like all kinds of stuff. And she was having a really hard time, and like I remember sitting in an exam, and I didn't have a pencil, and she just gave me her pencil. And in that moment, like the thing that I learned is like people who have the least amount have the most to give. And again, like just picking up different parts of my life that really just, when I have moments of like detachment from everything, those are the things that repeat in my head. And I think like that moment with my dad, that girl in that class, and just like those are the things that have made me want to continue certain things. So it's not really like a heroic story where I was just like, I was born this way, and like I had these like amazing premonitions, and I just had self-identity so well thought out. Like it's just little things like that
that shaped you.
That accumulated. Eventually I went into middle school, and this was another private school. Before that, we were in a co-ed school at the time, and we split up into the male side and the female side because during that time, Pakistan had opened their borders for refugees in Afghanistan. It was around the time of the war. And it was really nice because you got to see, you know, like a completely different culture kind of come in. It was welcomed open arms, at least what I remember from my very limited perspective at the time. But slowly, like politically, things started to change. So there was like a lot of like billboards. You would see like blacked out faces of women. And so that kind of like, I feel like it was a shift that you just saw so quickly happen in front of your eyes. And I think I picked up on the, you know, like the theory is that you open the borders and be welcoming, and this is like a really good thing that's supposed to happen. And then on the ground level, you start to see the shifts, and you see like how things change. And so I had a very negative outlook on it. I was just like, well, we shouldn't open borders. Refugees shouldn't be allowed to come in. Like, look at what happened. We had this like, you know, the mindset changed. There was a lot of people that were coming in that had, you know, extremist views and stuff like that. Again, very limited perspective at the time. So picked up on that. And then I got into my middle school. And this is where I started to have issues in school with keeping up with grades and stuff. I think because I don't know if this is correct, but like these are pivotal points in your life. Like if you're from elementary up to until like the end of elementary school is like a pivotal point in your life, and then into middle school, into high school is like another very like prominent thing that happens like psychologically. And then same with like from high school to college, and then college to 25. And I think me having to shift places really shook me up quite a lot. And during that time, we were having a lot of issues with transportation, like not having access to proper transportation for me specifically. So not my siblings as much. But during those times when I had transportation issues, I would have to wait after school for a really long period of time. Like I would just, like no one would come pick me up, and I would have to wait for my siblings to get off of school, which was usually, an hour, maybe like more than that later than when I got off of school. So I'd have to wait because we only had one car, or like it was like a weird system that was going on. Needless to say, I would wait. And during that time, I got to gain some perspective. I talked to the faculty or the cleaning staff at that school quite a lot. And like I said, I come from a place of like social status is a lot of an issue. So I would talk to them, and like there was so much humanity there. Like it was, I mean, of course, because they're humans. Like that was what was happening. I was like connecting, and I was just like, I can connect and still be where I am, and she is where she is, and we still have like crossovers. And again, picked up on that. And then moving on from there, I came to the U.S. Again, pivotal ages, right in freshman year of high school. So shifting homes prior, then also like shifting schools to now I'd shifted a completely different country, as well as, everything else, like knew everything. Like I didn't know what anything meant. I'd seen movies, but like I didn't pay attention to movies as seriously because I thought they were fictional, right? Like sometimes it didn't even seem like it was real.
Right.
So, because like I was so used to Bollywood. So in Bollywood, like a lot of stuff was just kind of like made up. It's like fictional.
Embellished. Yeah.
Yeah. So like coming here, like I was just like, oh, like no, they really do have like lunchrooms like this and stuff like that. So it was very interesting. And like I also had to navigate my I didn't realize how much. So previously my ADHD had been kind of like covered by the fact that I was high producing. So like I was like, doing really well in school, and nobody, like my parents were kind of just like, oh, she's self-disciplined. She's really good at it. When I started to need more of that attention, like I said, when I was in middle school, I started to like kind of fall back a little bit because like a lot of stuff was happening in family. Those like symptoms were starting to come up, but I wasn't still like, they were used to me being self-sufficient. So not a lot of attention was put there. And then when I came to the US, my parents were going through a lot worse. Their relationship kind of dwindled down to basically nothing, to the point where like they weren't having conversations. They kind of decided that it's better not to talk to each other, or else we'll just keep on having these fights. And in those moments, I think my symptoms got worse and worse because I couldn't focus at school. Also, I didn't have any friends. I was struggling there. That's where like my addiction to mehndi started. Like, really, like in the cafeteria, I would like just start doing mehndi because I didn't know how to connect. I was just like confused. I also, it's funny to think about now, but it was like so scary back then. I didn't know where to sit in the cafeteria.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
and then at first I was just like, oh, it's like first come, first serve basis. But then you sit and it's just like everyone's staring at you. Like she just sat here. Like you're not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
So I moved around quite a bit, and then eventually a friendly face would just be like, all right, like you can come sit with us. And again, picked up on that as well. Like that is the kindness that really meant something to me in that very scary stage of my life.
Yeah.
So again, but the thing with high school education was that it was a lot easier because I'd already done some of the stuff in Pakistan. So it was kind of repeat for me. So it was easier to like go through everything. But then I think college is when it really hit me, where my ADHD was like starting to really mess with me because now I was like all by myself, right? Like I have to figure everything out on my own. But in all of that, picked up, like, I went to college for a really long time. Like, I've been for 6 years till I finally got my associates. And then I think 2 more years at Salisbury to get to sophomore year of university to finally realize, like, I think I'm not doing the right thing. And then I started, working. Then we started the race thing during the pandemic. And it was during the race thing is when I had to like sit with myself quite a lot. And COVID, primarily because of COVID, right? That I had to sit with myself and figure out what was going on. Like what parts of me was I not paying attention to? That's also when I started therapy because I was like at the brink of it. Like I was just like, I cannot help myself anymore. And I just need help. And when I went, and therapy has been hugely like significant in building that character. And so I think who I've become now is and this is going to sound so corny, and I know we've heard this before, is the person that I wish someone was for me when I was a child. And all throughout my life, like whatever I was missing, I have been trying to like in some ways provide in any space that I enter into. And I think it is impactful for me. Like there's the why of everything is again centered back into you. So my motivation has always been, this serves me because it makes me feel like whatever happened to me did not just happen in jest. Like it meant something, it did something, I can heal from it by providing it elsewhere. And also like understanding that ripple effect of like, if I do it here, there'd be less of this happening because, it kind of exponentially grows from there.
Ooh, Hannah. So I guess my biggest question is, after hearing that story, is how you then navigated and now continue to navigate the duality of your two cultures and identities here in America, because you go visit and your mom's there in Pakistan. And I know you guys, every Sunday you get together with your siblings and your dad. Like, how have you navigated that, and who has helped you, or has it been like self-imposed or sustained because your mom's there? Yeah, tell us about that.
So when I got here, that's a really good question. I would say I didn't really navigate it that well. I didn't know what to do. Like there was so much information thrown at me all at once. But I would say like the first thing I did was like focus on changing my accent, because it was such a, like, even like, you know, like some of it came from Pakistan as well. Like we were ingrained to like try to not Americanize. We were Europeanizing our accents, our English accents. We were already taught how to speak in English. But we would always try to like make our accents a little bit like Europeanized, or we would make fun of our own, like, you know, the Indian, English accent, and just make fun of it and stuff. There was a lot of internalized stuff that was going on there. But when I came here, like I realized what the repercussions of that was, like if you do have an accent. So I was just like immediately working on it. And then I would get comments, again, like the way that internalized racism works. But like I would get comments like, oh wow, like yours just, I just didn't realize that you would speak that well, and stuff like that. And it came from kids, it came from kids' parents, it came from teachers, like everybody. And I almost took that as a compliment. I was just like, oh,
at that age,
I'm better.
English
better
is good.
than you're right. And so some of that was that, like, you know, I also was in a predominantly non-Pakistani Indian school. Like there was some, I just didn't have a lot of interactions with them. So I was pretty isolated. So to answer your question of like who supported me through that, nobody, like I didn't really have anyone to guide me through it. There were questions that I had that I don't think I ever asked, like how to use the line in the cafeteria. Like I never even asked it. I just like pretended I never needed to eat. And then, but like it was also because I just all stopped having an appetite during lunchtime. Like I just didn't feel like it. But how did I make it through? I think during that time I was very somehow got into journalist documentaries. Like there were these like individually made documentaries back in Pakistan where people were like talking about the deep underground stuff. And I got very interested into that. And I would like kind of watch those and feel empowered because I was just like, this is what it means to be a Pakistani. Like you're wanting to do better and like find ways to document stuff so that you can like expose things that are going on that's wrong. Like to me, a journalist is what it meant to be a Pakistani. And I think for a really long time, that's why I wanted to be a journalist, like deep down inside. But like I was at school, you know, like one, it was like my parents always wanted me to be a doctor. And then the stereotype, obviously. So the school also kind of leaned on me going towards that route as well. And they didn't necessarily, there was no like fostering or like thinking differently. They were not really honing into what my individuality was. And we know how high schools work. So basically at that point I was just like, well, if I'm not a doctor, then I'm not good. And so I just focused on trying to figure out how I was going to become a doctor and like focused on that in high school, which made my, you know, the grade thing even worse because I was not into it. Another thing that connected me back to my like just kept me like wanting to fight for my own identity in a space where I didn't know what it meant to be me. Because, you know, we've talked about this before, even in conversations on race. It's like, what exactly is race? Like, I didn't know I had a race till I got here, and they were just like, check a box. And I'm just like, I don't even fall in this. Like, Asia, like the Asia that they want you to sign up for is not the Asia that I'm from. And so it's not specific enough. And, you know, whatever, I always stayed Asian, and there'd be like weird faces around me, like, you're not Asian. And I'm just like, okay, well then what do you tell me, what do you want me to put in there? So with that, I think like I kind of just went back to those thoughts. I think like it was just like, okay, like journalist, like that's what it means to be Pakistani. You know, just having Mehndi was a huge thing for me because like I picked it up back in Pakistan and I was like super little, but it brought so much joy on people's faces whenever we would do henna for Mehndi for each other. And so like I think I wanted to like recreate that joy when I was in the US, and I would like feel whenever I felt down, I always picked up the Mehndi cone and I would do it. And I think like in a way I was just like hoping that at the end of when the stain comes out, like I could replicate the same kind of joys. And for the longest time I didn't. And I think this is like so crazy because like I wrote about this in one of my journals recently. Flash forward to recently, I was doing Mehndi for y'all. And I realized like the feeling was back, that replication of like that joy that comes from just doing henna for people who are like understand the celebration part of it and like understand you and the cheer in it, and like don't view it as like, because there was a lot of things like I think it's like all kinds of attention isn't necessarily a good thing.
Right.
So when I was in high school, like I said, like I would like start doing Mehndi for myself in the cafeteria. And like it brought attention to me, and I was very confused. I was just like, well, this kind of feels good because like finally being actually visible. Right. Because at one point I was completely invisible. And then every time I was visible, it was just like, oh, she's that girl. Or it's just like Hannah Montana. Because like that was a song that came out. So like people associated that with my name. And then there was like, oh, the girl that does henna. And I was just like, funny enough, like my name is Henna. Like, so, and like, I don't know. And there was also points where people would just be like, oh, it stinks. Like, what is that? And I think that's where I was just like, wow, like it's doing something for me. It served something for me, but it didn't bring the same I could not replicate that joy. Like it was just like, okay, like now I have like a bunch of, like there would be a line in the cafeteria asking for henna tattoos. Or like tattoos.
And the school
that you
allowed
get.
it?
Yeah.
They didn't like question it?
And it would just be like a bunch of kids around me. Oh, can you put it here, here, here? And like some squashing of my own like ego that I did was just like saying yes to everything. And so like I never even did Mehndi for my sister's feet and stuff like that. And they would just like prop their foot up. And I was just like, can I have that butterfly over here? And like, again, it's like that kind of stuff, like microaggressions, right? Or it's just like lack of understanding. Where it was just like, can I have this and the other thing, and not realizing what it meant to me in that moment. So and there was, again, like the visibility and invisibility there was also very crazy, because while I would do the Mehndi, I remember like I could hear the conversations around me, and it was just like they would just talk around me about me, but not
to you directly.
Right. There was no conversation. It was just like, how do you think she learned how to do this? Someone else would answer. It would be like, oh, I think she just like comes up with all of this stuff in her head. And then someone else would just be like, yeah, like look at her. She's so focused. It's almost as if she can't hear. And I would purposely just let that go. I'd be like, okay, if you said I can't hear, I can't hear. And I just numb myself out. Teachers would do the same thing. There was one of the teachers who called me in the middle of the class during our reading session in English. And she was just like, hey, do you mind like doing my mehndi? I'm going to like Ocean City. So while everyone else was doing their reading session, I was at the front of the class doing her mehndi for free. By the way, like I did everything for free. But in the meantime, they still had like, making comments about like, oh, it kind of stinks. Like it kind of stings. Like this happens, that happens. And there was no like discussion, conversation, appreciation. Like, what does it mean? What's the thing?
So that henna that you're describing in high school is very different from the henna that I know now and that I interact with, who would definitely say something and who would speak up for herself and others. How did you get to the henna that you are now?
I think it took a lot of one, just learning from your own mistakes, and another was, at one point we started doing, again, conversations on race has been very useful, because before doing conversations on race, we did like equity trainings and race related trainings, and just understanding what the concept of race is. And I think in those moments, I'm so proud to say also that like I've been surrounded by the most amazing Black women in my life. And so I think just seeing the fight, like, because you don't have an option.
Right. And survival.
Right. And like the encouragement, the like, do it still, not back down. And don't get me wrong, like my mom has been a huge influence on me in regards to that as well. She stood up for herself. She got divorced, right? Like in our society, that's big thing. So like as far as influences go, I've been influenced by the most amazing group of women that I could ever think of. As far as like standing up for myself, I think I had to retrain my brain and understand that the perspective that I was valuing wasn't the perspective that I needed to cater to anymore. And once I stopped giving value to the white perspective, I started to, one, value myself more, value my identity more, regardless of how I identify myself, like whether I identify myself as a Pakistani-American or just as a woman or as nothing. Like I value myself. It's mine. It's my belief, and I'm going to stick by it because I said so. Yeah. Because my experiences have led me to this, and I believe in them. And so it has kind of made me very like undeterred. I've also just gotten to the point where like realizing that when people try to put you down or like shut you down, that they have their own things going on, which is primarily coming from therapy. Because like she had said this to me one time, and I think I never let that go, where she was just like, it's not a you thing, it's a them thing. They're working on something. So even if they're, if you say something and you get a lot of hate for it, especially with racial stuff that we talk about, like racial equity, and you're trying to like make changes, and it's just like, well, like you don't know what you're talking about, or like maybe it's not as, blatantly racist or blatantly yes or no, or like hate based, but sometimes it's coded, right? Like it's more so, oh, well, we won't make as much money if we do this. Like, I don't know if we have funds. I don't think we can move anything around. I think my experience in like different parts of working in different things really helped me. So like I worked as a server, as a bartender. I've worked with a lot of customer service. I worked at a coffee shop. I've also owned my own business at this point. And then, so there was a lot of trials and errors, and there was a lot of like human interactions. And I got to learn a lot about like what motivates us as human beings and what our common flaws are. And we're all like, not to oversimplify human beings, because we do have complex emotions and complex things that we kind of get stuck in on. But the core of us is just, we want to be loved. We need society to survive. We need community, and we need a goal. And so as long as if any of that gets threatened, we think we need to protect it, right?
And the defense.
The defense. So as long as I could connect to your why at the same time as I'm like telling you why my why is also important, I think we can make changes. So all that to say that I have become very like self-confident and me, myself, and I, because I think it serves everybody at the end. If I focus on myself and my passions, I do less harm in the world. Because the more you do like things for other people, you start to resent them. Then you start to hate them, like that kind of stuff. So I've just kind of peeled it back to like, what do I want? What makes me happy? This doesn't serve me anymore. I've stopped doing that. Like different things like that. Like I would never go back to restaurant business. Well, not. So I do want to go into food and beverage, but not restaurants. So culture is interesting.
So on that note, what do you love most about yourself?
I think that I'm constantly evolving and always growing. And I don't quote myself as a certain kind of person. And I don't think I ever will be able to, because I'm constantly growing and changing, and I'm very, very, it's kind of chaotic answer because, you know, like stagnant answers are sometimes like an easy and like more comforting answer to sit with. But like, I think that is by far the most precious thing that I've found about myself.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you. I'm so happy. That was an emotional one. I wasn't expecting that. But thank you for being vulnerable, and thank you for being here and being part of this space.
Thank you for having me again. And I hope my ADHD didn't take the conversation.
No, I loved it.
Okay.
I'm down for the ride.